with the timestamp. I'm going to give a timestamp in the chat box between minute 1, 7, 8, and 8:20 seconds. And also be mindful of your time management, because the CAP and also organizing committee have announced that if you are overtime, the maximum time of your overtime is 10 minutes, and afterwards you are going to be cut off. And yeah, basically if you're already speaking for more than 8 minutes and 20 seconds, the adjudicators are not going to write down anything. So yeah, be mindful of the time as well. And also be respectful and refer to equity, because this is going to talk about minorities. Probably there's going to be some sensitive topic. Hopefully, hopefully everything's good. All right, I think we can directly proceed with the round. Calling upon PM. Here.
Am I audible? Test.
Yep, you are.
Nah. Okay, I'm gonna. I'm gonna start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Honors. So in this motion, we first thing we want to do is describe this what intersectionality is in our government bench. Intersectionality is the idea that different aspects of a person's identity, such as gender, race, sexual orientation, class, etc., interact with each other to create unique experience of discrimination and privilege. It is often used to describe the ways in which discrimination and oppression are experienced by those who are disadvantaged. In countries like America and Europe, most of those who carry out feminist demonstrations are mostly white women who are already independent and individualistic. They can carry out demonstration by taking advantage of their advantage as white people. Intersectionality on highly diverse countries, feminism issues are feminism issues related with demographic, nationalities, race, religion, socio-economics, class, and another thing. And there are common ground on highly diverse countries. Feminist issues are feminism issues related with a wider aspect, such as a woman in workforce, woman in an organization, salary of woman. In the current status quo, the problem is women, regardless of race, religion, socioeconomic class, they got a discrimination based on their gender. This is especially common in highly diverse countries where women are differentiated not only because of prejudice against their sex, but also about their identity, such as race, religion, socioeconomic class in highly diverse country. The prejudice is aimed in much more layered way compared to those of less diverse countries. Why should it be the feminist is in highly diverse country? However, we must acknowledge that women of non-Caucasian or white people backgrounds such as Latin, Asian, and African background face higher risk and oppression because of the prejudice that society have against their backgrounds. Women of poverty face greater risk of harm and prejudice compared to women of middle class and above, even if they form the same racial background, as well as with the same logic in America and other highly diverse countries. Women of women with an Asian background face greater risk of harm than African American women because of their Asian backgrounds. The racism and prejudice that society have against them is because African American women are put at a much higher regard in comparison to Asian women. Moving to the mechanism that our government bets will bring, the first that we can prioritize this narrative by first acknowledging what are being oppressed. And as the government bends, we believe that intersectionality in a more diverse country holds more priority in achieving a wider aspect in feminism agenda, because the internalization of the human rights issues rooted in highly diverse countries are more varied and needs to be cleared out first rather than moving to the arguments. First, our arguments is Intersectionality promotes equality in women among women. Women in highly diverse country are fit with different narrative of oppression. For example, women might be taught in their religion that women should not be a leader, while women might be taught that as a woman from certain race, societal stage, they are less worthy than other women. We take an example in India. They are feminists who want to support their gender equality in their country, even though they are a feminist who have equality in terms of finance, education, or race, but they still must maintain equality in their workplace, increase their equality such as getting an appropriate workload or getting an appropriate salary, what they do and achieve. On the other hand, feminists who are a certain race will find it difficult to put forward this narrative of intersectionality due to the tradition of their own race, such as we take an example as women cannot do work because it's not their right to do some work, but men must work. Clearly, this is inversely proportional to the meaning of intersectionality, whereas does not matter financial condition or education. Every woman who wants voice feminism deserves to get her equality. And the second, next, the problem with women in this country is that they translate feminism words in different way. This is a more priority issues because even in the unique circumstances, they are already unique for each other. Feminism centers on having equal rights of all sexes. Even in an equal environment, there will always be someone at disadvantage. And the second argument, why focus on feminism is in highly diverse country. This is because countries that are highly diverse tend to be trendsetters, the capital of progression. We taken about the USA, Britain, Australia, and similar countries. They're the countries that you hear the most fighting for equal rights in the media, not like our Indonesia, they're not giving much feminism's demonstration. And this is why we believe that those in highly diverse countries should take the move in prioritizing this narrative. That's all for me. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Prime Minister, for that wonderful speech. Now to open the case of negative compound LO here.
All right. Just to confirm, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
All right. Give me 1 minute to re-plug my laptop and to set up my timer. All right. Starting in 3, 2, and 1. 2 things on setup before I proceed, right? Number 1, let's talk about like what it's going to look like when we talk about the commonality against women in opposition side of the house. 3 things on this one. Number 1, I think that the most important the most important thing to note is that the picturization of struggles of women, obviously, that's going to be used in the advocacy is most likely going to be the common struggles that all women, regardless of their identity, face. This looks like, for example, women suffering under the system of capitalism because it inherently favors men, for example. This looks like women inherently, like regardless of your identity, getting like unequal pay, for example, in comparison to or lower pay in comparison to men, for example. So these are most likely the types of persuasion that's going to happen under opposition. But number two, I think that it's also important that the main function or the main aim for commonality amongst women, for example, is to aim for solidarity of the movement, mainly to try and pierce through for electability of more women politicians, more women representations within the parliament. And number three, I think it's also very important to note that the implication of like solidarity towards women is currently already being seen in the current status quo. This is how, for example, a lot of women figures or women or feminist activists giving support towards like Megan Thee Stallion after the shooting incident that happened to her. So I feel like these types of like commonality is something that's going to be empowering. We're going to explain to you later why it's better under our side of the house. But number two, I think that in characterizing what feminist and highly diverse countries look like, right? Two things on this one. Number one, I think it's important to understand that the to begin with, the pursuit of the first, second, or and even like third wave of feminism is came this far into this current day of society because of commonality. So that's exactly how we envision the country or these highly diverse countries to look like. But even if, for example, a government still wants to argue regarding how there is a more like dominant part of like women community of feminism that is more predominant, we're going to also explain to you why it's going to be better under our side of the house. I'm going two important framings. Number one, I think it's important to note that this debate values the important likelihood of success that women can actually do. This looks like means, for example, piercing through the parliament or getting more representation or getting their policies executed, for example. But number two, even if, for example, you want to consider it to be equally likely, why is it going to create better changes under our side of the house? So I'm going to engage two argumentations, right? All rebuttals will be integrated. Number one, I'm going to talk about like how can we prove that likelihood of success is better under our side of the house and also better changes. But number two, I'm also going to talk about like how is it like principally something that's good when we actually push for commonality. This is also going to tackle down like the principle, the differences of like what a government is trying to champion. I have so first regarding like likelihood of success and better changes, I have like three things on this one. So first, what is the current issue in the current status quo and why is it completely bad? I think that in the current status quo, we're opting into such a patriarchal system where a lot of women are mostly existing into the intersectionality of each woman, which ends up in the current status quo discussion in social media, for example, becomes very intertwined between like certain types of feminism with another. This necessarily is a problematic concern or condition because this then favors the existing patriarchal system as well, or patriarchal narrative to pit women against each other, for example, to pit successful women against each other. I think that this is a very common thing that happens in the current status quo that we want to protect, that we want to go against under our side of the house. Second layer then, why is this going to be most likely solved under our side of the house? How do we convince that the commonality is going to be good? I have four things on this one. Number one, I think that commonality then pushes political power for the women. This looks like catering to more women consolidated into one party, unifying women with one vision, for example, which means that if you're able to unify the women, then we most likely can get up to like 40% of the votes within the electoral system. This is important for the electability of more women politicians, being able to vote yes, for example, for women catering policies within the parliament. But number two, I think that under our side of the house as well, socially, people are interested to discuss due to the equal grounds that women actually face. This means that every woman fundamentally share the same struggle, for example, therefore allowing more productive discussion and transfer of knowledge regarding how they think they can solve this problem, rather than in the current status quo, the discussion of like feminism is necessarily only because of like the intersectionality of it, but eventually it cannot come to like a consensus due to like the varying differences in like current day feminism. Therefore, I think that this is when commonality comes in hand, because therefore the discussion will be more productive. But number three, I think that economically, what's very important in terms of like trying to push women politicians into the parliament is also obviously funding and donors. This is used to like campaign or like even like convince people in the current status quo that women parties and more women politicians are needed. I think that economically, what's the reason as to why we can actually garner this under our side of the house more is because we can convince donors more. This looks like when you're able to convince you're able to convince the donors more when you are able to give them the generic information as to what like general women actually face in the current status quo. Probably you talk about this to other women, for example, who are privileged and are willing to donor um, your movement, for example, or your party. But this means that they are also likely to like believe this certain like explanation that you have, because like they also probably have faced the same discrimination in the industry that they probably live in. Either they are CEOs, for example, or they're just like good celebrities but still discriminated due to the existence of men within within Hollywood, for example. But number four, I think that it's also important to also have a good social media coverage for like social movements, including feminism. This means that you're showcasing a unified movement, good media coverage, but at the end of the day, what's important is that people see you as someone that does not discriminate against certain groups. Why is this very important, right? I think that it's very important because who you want to also influence in the current status quo is people in the gray area who are most likely leaning towards like being conservative. And how do you convince these people is that when you see that there's a tangible, generic information that affects almost all women, right? So regardless of what your background is, this looks like exactly what I've characterized before regarding like the existence of capitalism that combats women, for example, or pushes women to be more oppressed rather than men, for example. I feel like this portrayal is something that's more viable by a lot of people rather than the intersectionality of women, which is probably more complicated to comprehend by people in the gray area. But I think that third layer, then, how can this create better changes? Two things on this one. Number one, I think that better changes are likely because more fundamental issues or more widespread issues against women are necessarily being addressed when you do this. This means that you deal with gender equality issue. You deal with like the identity issues, for example, rather than only issues that like cater to a certain part of women. This looks like when women are generally in this and not favored by the capitalized system that exists. Therefore, what you're going to push is that the equality of pay towards like all kinds of women, regardless of their background. But number two, I feel like exactly with this, then we can cater to even the interest of like different intersectionality of women. This looks like the protection of Black women, Asian women, etc. Because there's going to be like one public like types of like policy that's going to cater to them. But layer number three, what is the problem under this side of the house and why is it likely? Number one, under this side of the house, separation is likely, and the difference between intersectionality creates less electability for women due to the existence of possible different parties to cater to each intersectionality of women. But number two, I think that the major issue that's going to come from their side of the house is that they're favoring the patriarchal narrative of pitting women against each other. This opens up chances for men, for example, in the current status quo, to actually push that narrative and try to beat every women politician down. Exactly what we're very proud to oppose.
All right, thank you, Leader Opposition, for that great remarks. Now, continue the case from affirmative, calling upon DBM. Here.
All right, let me set up my timer for a while. Going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Okay, I'm going to give two main contributions in this debate. First, I'm going to give a response to the previous speaker from the opposition bench, and second, I'm going to give an extension from my first speaker. Now, moving on to my first argument. We think that the idea that the opposition bench is bringing to you is how a common ground strategy will put women in the same place or perspective, and how this is a strategic political movement in order to put the woman in a legislative, for example, and in order to be able to change the policy. Because what they're trying to do is they're focusing on the common ground issues, like, for example, how to put women in as leaders, or how to put women in representative for the people, and etc. We say that this is not going to fly in the end, because understand that in a high diverse country, the problem is internalized inside. Just like my first speaker has already told you, that the problem is not that simple, and understand that even in an unequal environment, woman itself, it's still unequal. So how are you going to expect that woman going to make the same solution of their problem when they even have the different problem to begin with? Like, for example, there are women from a certain religion that thinks that they can be leaders, and there are also other women that are not allowed to work, for example, in order to feed themselves and enable to make prosperity for themselves. Now, this is two different problem causes by two different aspects. Now, if we only focus on the common ground, we don't think that in the end, the goals of the feminist movement in a higher diverse country will be able to achieve, because to begin with, the woman itself face different problem with different solution. Changing the, let's say, putting the focus on the common ground issues, in order to make women on the top to be able to change the policy, we think that this is not going to be happen, because in order to do that, you will have to make all of the women have the same thoughts, have the same perspective. Now, how are they going to have the same perspective if they don't even have, if they even have like a different problems to begin with? So we think that the proposal that the opposition bench trying to give you in this debate is unsustainable for the for the feminist movement in the highly diverse country, and we choose to prioritize intersectionality proposal. Now, moving on to my extension from my first speaker, I'm going to talk about how feminism should not promote eliteness or internal discrimination. Now, understand that in early year of feminism is also seen as an elitist movement. For example, the feminist woman in the 1960s trying to defend women's right to be able to vote, but at the same time and place, there are women that is still struggling to live and being killed for doing nothing. Now, this scenario is still happening in the current status quo of a highly diverse country. With the same example, how are you going to defend women's right to be paid the same when there are some women from certain race or group at the same place can't even work to begin with due to the stigma that their religion or race is implying? So, or for example, in India, for example, even a woman from Shudra group is seen lower than Vaishya group of women. So we think with this different kind of cases, to just chase the common ground is not going to put the woman in the same perspective. And how are you going to achieve a certain goals if the people inside the movement does not even have like the same perspective? So what we're trying to do here is that we want to make a sustainable movement in the feminist community. We want to make women sure that they have each other. Now, with this thing, if we push to pursue the common ground strategies, what will happen is that some women will think that the movement is exclusive for certain group only. Let's say in a highly diverse country, there are people that is more privileged than the other. Like there are a woman that is growing in a family that enables them to pursue a good education, or pursue or have a good work, for example, have a good job, and they get paid even if they didn't get paid well. But there are some women also that still can't work because the perspective or the stigma that their race or their religion is trying to push to them. Now, in the common ground era, probably we're going to be more neglecting towards the woman that can't even work, because we're chasing the issue of trying to make women being paid the same. Now, how are you going to expect that these women will support the women that support the common ground strategies to begin with? So we think that in order to create a sustainable movement, what you're going to do is to create the same perspective, but other than that, you have to create a narrative where women thinks that even if they came from different backgrounds, they eventually can be in the same stage of inequality. Because face it, the reality is that some women is more disadvantageous than the other. So if we pursue the problem of the higher of the common ground, we're probably going to be more discriminative towards the people that has more disadvantages. And what's going to happen is that this group of people will feel small, and they will think that the feminist movement is not for them, and therefore in the end, uh, it's not going to matter if you put the woman in the parliament, for example, because the perspective in the woman community to begin with is already corrupted. They already think that this movement is not for them. This movement is not serving their problems. So all of the benefits and all of the things that the opposition bench trying to give to you, they might be true, but we think that it's not going to be sustainable for the woman or the feminist movement in the long term. It's just going to fix the problem that we can see, but the root is going to still be toxic. And we tend to just be dismissive toward this thing when we are achieving something more general like that. So when you chase for something general, more general, like the wages, women, and organization and all of that, you will chase for something more general in the run in the future. So you became more dismissive towards the roots of the problem. And we think this is very dangerous because as a feminist movement, of course, our goals is to make women feel equal, not only in the world as a whole, but also inside the women's community. And we think what as a woman we should do is that we should feel safe in our community first, in order to make a better world between women and men. So proud to propose.
All right, thank you, Deputy Prime Minister, for that fine speech. Now to continue the case from opposition, calling upon Dia Ol here.
Okay, hi, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Okay, before I start, just like a quick trigger warning. I don't mean to offend anyone with my speech. I'm very sorry about whatever might happen. I just really talk about this just for the sake of the debate. Okay. I'll start my speech in 3, 2, and 1. Before going on to my extension, there are 2 points of rebuttals that I want to make in my speech. First, regarding what government said about how it's impossible to make a lot of women has the same perspective, right? But second, I'm also going to rebut regarding the eliteness. The first one, first about like forcing women to have the same perspective. Two responses into this, right? First, we don't think the problem or that woman experience is that difference, right? Within the problem that you experience regarding assault or the lack of educational recognition and whatnot, is the same that and experienced by by every woman in that particular country or even all around the world, right? I think inherently you come from the same point and the same struggle, which is the structural discrimination that men impose to you, right? It means like struggles like catcalling or law protection or having the same wage as men. I think those kind of problem exist and experienced by every woman in this particular world, right? We don't think this is the problem of making them to have the same perspective. I think women have the same perspective regarding these issues to begin with. The second response then, even if we have to bite the bullet, right? We're not talking about changing the woman. Sure, maybe for some reason they might have different needs, but we think what we're trying to pursue here is the movement, right? Is the feminist movement. By changing what they want to campaign for, the policy they're aiming and whatnot into a common interest, into like a more commonality purpose, right? Then the biggest question that government try to ask to us is how then the woman in our side of the house would want to tolerate each other, would want to share the same perspective, right? I think the answer is easy, right? They have a lot of relatability, right? Being forced to marry, for example, catcalling, being forced to not pursue their education and whatnot, right? I think there is a benefit of commonality. Most likely, it's a benefit that was celebrated by that will be celebrated by everyone, right? They share their stories with their girlfriend, they share their stories with their mother, they share their stories with their children and whatnot. So we think one benefit that commonality provide is something that more likely will be celebrated by every woman to begin with, right? We don't think this is a problem regarding perspective that government try to argue in this particular debate. But second, then regarding the eliteness, right? Two responses into this. First, I think this is simply not true, right? Commonality is not about eliteness. It's about taking the most common issue and use that as our main goal to fight for. We don't think the struggle of having sufficient law protection is eliteness. Please enlighten us, right? But second response, I think it exists in their side even worse, right? On government, they will only cater to one particular segment of feminism. Therefore, they will only talk about that issues, that very segmented issues, right? This is likely because, for example, the political campaign will think that engaging to the most common issue is not urgent anymore, right? They will want to engage to this most popular segment of the feminism because it's just going to be more beneficial, more efficient for these political parties, for example, and therefore it brings the atmosphere of the campaign into one particular issue, one segment trying to campaign for, right? This is the eliteness that they're talking about. It only happened in government side of the house. Moving on to my extension, then I will have layers of extension. First, I'm going to talk about why safe space will be better achieved in our side of the house. Second is why a segmented success is a failed success. The first extension regarding a safe space. Then. Let's first characterize how women is attracted to join feminist movement, right? A, they feel a strong sense of community inside the community. They see how women are able to support each other, listen to each other, and help fighting for each other's struggle, right? But B, they feel a sense of relatability to the issue that the campaign brought, particularly regarding common issues like social prejudice, beauty standards, and whatnot. Within this won't be achieved in governments of the house because of two things, right? First, they will constantly question their struggles. They will feel like their concern is not that important, and that there are other concerns that should be prioritized, right? Because each segment try to campaign for their own goals and their own particular concern, right? But second, other women among other people will also be the one who gaslight your struggles, right? Other women will touch, women in a workplace, for example, would gaslight you, saying that, oh, your concern as a Marxist feminism is too idealist, and what people need to do is to adapt to the capitalist system we live in. Those kind of discussion, those kind of gaslighting, right? We think this only means that it will be in that we think that it might be intuitive at first for government to think that intersectionality will represent women better and create a better safe space, right? But we think that's wrong. These women are already struggling with each other's opinion regarding themselves, right? But in government, it will be way harder because it's also women, the other women from other segment who will constantly, having opinion regarding the different concern that this other woman experience and whatnot is going to be worse in governments of the house, right? But even if they argue that safe space and representation will still be there in governments of the house, right? We think it might exist at the cost of sacrificing other segments of feminism, right? There will only be one of a few segments of feminism that dominate the status quo, as what Rizky has told you, and being catered to while the other is being neglected and overshadowed, right? So within the sacrifice is too big, and within that is going to be very harmful because you have to sacrifice 10 other segments while your only segment is the one is being catered by the politicians and whatnot. We don't want that to happen in our world, right? But second layer of extension then regarding why a segmented success is a failed success. When you think that you're in a segmented part of the community, it almost felt like your goal is to achieve that particular interest of that particular segment, right? For example, Marxist feminists would care more about the interest of them being a Marxist feminist than any other interest, right? Why is that so? First, they feel like their interest was being catered more by this segment, by this particular segment, right? For example, their issue regarding struggle of poverty will probably understood better by the Marxist feminists rather than the high economic class feminists or feminism in general, right? The second, presumably, they will interact more with other members of that particular segment, right? They meet more, they talk more, they share more, they discuss more because it feels easier for them to talk to each other, right? All in all, it creates an echo chamber exclusive to that particular segment without actually care about the bigger picture, right? How does this entail to, right? The struggle that experienced by the other segment would not be important anymore for the other the other segment, right? How does this look like? For example, Me Too movement is one of the practical example of intersectionality, right? Me Too movement was based on the struggle that was experienced by middle to high class women that has popularity in which gathers spotlights and support for them in social media, right? Me Too movement is seen as a complete success by everyone, but it actually overshadowed the struggle that was experienced by the other segment, right? For example, lower economic class feminism, black feminism, and whatnot. They don't have the exposure, they don't have the support from people in social media and whatnot. This is a complete failure for those kind of segments based on from the Me Too movement, right? What does this show you, right? It shows ignorance in a political spectrum. We think that engulf woman-based problem that wouldn't like woman-based problem that was like commonality in like feminism would not be longer advantageous for this political campaign, or otherwise it will be overshadowed by this one dominating segment in which they would not engage any longer to the other issues or to the other common issues, in which sacrifice a lot of women who is not a part of that particular segment, right? But B, within the benefit that one segment of feminism champion might not be effective for other segments, right? It might backlash and overshadow the other segments because people think like we achieve progress, right? But when that's not actually the case for like black feminism and whatnot, right? So the comparison then within our side, when it's actually communality, people care more about catering to everyone. People people take care of every single woman in that country, for example, as a part of them, as a part of the responsibility, right? We think that the failure will also be represented during making policy. You need to realize that policy in which catering to one segment will most likely harm the other segment. Like, for example, lessening the barrier for a woman to thrive in the workplace will only take away the attention, take away the capability for the government, for example, to take care about like woman in poverty that has no capital to access education to begin with, right? We think that is unfair in government. We are the only one who create commonality. We are so proud to oppose. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Deputy Leader Opposition, for that fine speech. Now to continue the case and summarize the case from affirmative, calling upon Clivvord. Here.
Hello, is my voice audible?
Yep, loud and clear.
Thank you. I'll start my pronouns is she, her. I'll start my timer in 3, 2, 1. I have several rebuttals regarding the points by DLO and LO. Number 1 is that there will be no dominance in certain groups only. What will happen is that all of these groups, all of these segments that they have tried to say is emerging as one, and they're all of equal importance, and we work as hand to hand. However, yes, in intersectionality, we need to focus on the specific struggles that these specific groups faces. Why so? Because these specific groups have their own problems, and if we don't solve the root of the problem, this will actually instead runtuhin, as in it will collapse into the root of feminism itself. If we do not focus about the specific struggles or the struggles that certain groups have, as in Asian people or Asian women against Black women, so we're not pitting them against each other because they have their own struggles. We are not here to promote pitting against each other. We're not pitting against one racial group into another racial group. We're here focusing on each other and then eventually working together to fix the cases between them, to fix the cases inside of them. We are not trying to say to simply focus on one of them. We're trying to say to focus on another and ignore the other. We are saying we need to focus on all of them and then and equally separate our resources to fight for feminism, within the feminist movement, because the struggles of cis women against trans women are different. The struggles of Asian women and Black women are different, whether it's in all settings, whether it's educational, whether it's in social struggles, whether it's political, all of the rights of the people, whether it's immigrant women and normal women, social race, religion, whether it's Muslim woman or Christian woman, they all have different struggles that they face. We can say that in common ground, we can say that, oh, they face prejudice against their religion. Like Hinduism and Islamic people, they struggle equally simply because they are mainly focused in East Asia or Southeast Asia or Asia. No, we try to say that in particular demographic, particularly in highly diverse countries where they are diverse, there's a lot of people. There will always be people that are minorities. Women are being shunned upon. Women are being prejudiced. They are being at a lower standing than men. That is why we need feminist movement. However, there are people within the woman demographic themselves that, because of their background that they cannot change, they must struggle more so than others. Especially, let's take a case here in America. In America, the two most common woman demographic is, out of all, is one, Caucasians and then Black women. Following that will be Asian Americans. that is, immigrants, and then following it will be Latinos, and then following that will be Southeast Asia. This is the demographic that we have, right? However, we also know that because of the differences, people treat each other differently. That's why we must treat the problems differently. We must we must treat and then fix the problem and also solve the problems differently in a different approach. We cannot just combine them all and make them into a common ground because they are not equal. We can say that there are struggles that are common. We can say that women are paid less. There's the generation gap. There's the gender gap between men and women. But then we also know that the gender that woman not just there's also another difference between other genders within women. Hold on. There's the sex gap between men and women. But however, women themselves within them also have the hierarchy, also have the differences between them, not only in sexual orientation or identity, such as trans women, whether they are cis, whether they're non-binary, or whether they're masculinity or femininity. Their expression themselves, they already have different struggles. We can say opposition can say that they all have common struggles, but the common struggles can only be this much, and the individual problems that each demographic have is larger than the common struggles itself. They can say that we should talk to entice the general public to join the movement in highly diverse country. We can talk about the common problems. However, because we already talked about the common problem in such extent, it's been such a long time since feminist movement have started, right? It have not been resolved. We can say that we have been resolved to a certain level, but the discussion in social media that they have, that opposition themselves have said in social media, is counterproductive. It's counterproductive. It's continuously repeating. The struggles keep on repeating and never been stopped. Why so? It's because in their side of the house, common ground, the problems that they're proposing are not being fixed, are not being discussed, because the roots of it, the individual problems that are faced by the individual demographics, are not being discussed. And that's why we're proud to propose. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Gopwip, for the good speech. Calling upon Opwip. Here.
Hi, can I be heard?
Yep.
Great. Oh, by the way, is this like recorded?
Yes, I think it is.
Oh yeah, okay. So yeah, just a disclaimer. I don't mean anything that, well, I mean something, but like not everything that I say in this speech. Like most of them are only for the purpose of this debate. So yeah. Okay. Every single progress that has happened towards women as we see it now only and exclusively happened when they decided to set aside their differences and join together to fight for their shared identity as women. The traps of individualism and ethnocentrism that is creeping to entrench on that fundamental instantiation of women's advocacy ought be avoided at all instances. That is not going to be the point of my speech though, because I'm not crazy. But what that side of the house offers at best is a slightly better utility for the segment of the community who are already quite privileged on either side, completely ignoring the struggles of every woman that they have to endure only because they are born a woman. We say enough is enough. Saving one life is fundamentally better than enriching some others. And I'm going to tell you mechanistically why that is exactly the trade-off that happens in this debate indefinitely. Two questions that I seek to address in this speech. The first is that why are we more likely to succeed fundamentally? And second, what changes are likely to be different in opposition? On success. So I just want to posit previously, right, that this is independent debate winning. Because insofar as success is a precondition for any changes at all, that I think both have sort of talked about, we point out that winning this clash wins us the debate. Because irrespective of any agenda or whatsoever that is the continuation of that success to begin with, you ought to have an avenue to do that, i.e. political and social platform. You ought to have an access towards that, prior to making any tangible changes, benefits, or harm in either side. What do we mean by success? I think this is important to define because insofar as government side of the house never actually even attempted to define what they think is success, we posit two things. The first is political reform, i.e. this is the most sustainable solution, right? I.e. we're sitting in the parliament, passing policies and stuff like that, dealing with the vast majority of women, bettering their life, giving legal certainty and whatever. But secondly, it's also social reform, right? We're talking about changing perceptions of individuals or of women, how they see women, for example, how they see the feminist movement as a whole. This is crucial. These are the prerequisites to get the safe space that we claim in our Senate House as well. In Gov, then, women do not even feel validated internally, right? Because they're constantly questioning whether or not what I believe is particularly true, whether or not I am a woman enough, for example, to not believe in these specific things. But also, they're constantly gaslighted externally by fellow women, saying that your agenda is not really important. We hear significantly no response from the Gov bench on that. That is a severe mistake they made. We told you 6 mechanisms, so we are much more likely to consolidate more power, and therefore by democratic virtue we have more chances to win things like election. Number one, we have political power, right? You're easier to rally, campaign, and get votes just by virtue that you have much more wider demography to cater to. Think of it this way. Think of the way political system empirically works universally, i.e. things like electoral college threshold, where there needs to be a certain, percentage that a party ought to fulfill, for example, before they can get into the election, like 5 or 10%, to get a chance to get to parliament. Or where there are things like gerrymandering made by the incumbents to break down voting blocks, for example, to make sure that the voting blocks of women do not fulfill this specific threshold that they cannot enter the parliament to begin with. In our side of the house, regardless of whatever gerrymandering that will happen either way in either side of the house, in our side, they can get in, right? They have bigger political power, they have bigger voting blocks. In Gov, then, at best, some of them are going to be left out. This negates all of the benefit of minority, even within the minority. Just crucially, in their side of the house, if one party wins, presumably the other will have less votes, and presumably some parties will not be able to cross that threshold to begin with. The second thing I told you is economic power. It's easier to allocate resources like natural or human resources, volunteers, and stuff like that. But also what we told you was that donors are likely to support unified movements insofar as they're unlikely to be canceled by internal of that movement to begin with. Thirdly, socially, right? I think people are likely to want to engage in our side of the house because this is something that they can easily see daily. Even people who are conservative by inertia, for example, can see women being catcalled on the street and stuff like that. Well, this is on the comparative. They're unlikely to relate to niche struggles that I think government that side of the house want to argue for. But also, we want to posit that people probably don't like things that are too radical, right? I think people are reluctant to invest so much on things that are uncertain. Notice that the political atmosphere is also quite shifting, right? Far left and far right ideas are quite unpopular, for example. In that side of the house, if you actually want to advocate for really, really radical ideas that only cater to specific part of women, probably people don't feel enough urgency. Not only do they have to make much more investment, but also the outcome of the political investment is not likely to be much better in their side of the house. The fourth thing that we told you was media presence. Media ought to cater and spotlight the most urgent issues that women are currently facing. In that side of the house, you're likely to raise to the spotlight, i.e. you will out contest one another, for example, because you want to be the one who is spotlighted by the media. The fifth thing to say is that even internally, the issues will be better dealt with in our side of the house because women are no longer afraid to spark discourses on social media or stuff like that on what's the most important agenda to deal with now, because you're no longer being accused of looking after your own specific subsection rather than the universal question of what actually women need in both sides of the house. But lastly, it's easier in government bench then to be weaponized by your opponents, talking about conservative men, for example, in a social media or Twitter quarrel between two subsections of women. Men can just quote tweet one of them, post women with a fucking T emoji and stuff like that, negating the entire discourse that you might have otherwise in our side of the house. We understand that this means some degree of simplification at work. We're happy to take the trade-off. We say, making it to the parliament, making it to the political position is a prerequisite for you to get any success. The second thing I want to talk about is what changes are likely to happen in opposition. But just note that the first argument is already winning insofar as we prove the precondition of whether or not benefit will exist. The first thing I want to talk about here is exclusive difference that we deal with to more potent problems in 3 key ways. The first is that we have more widespread and more common problem, i.e. usually the race to the median is something that is bad in debate biases, but this wins out on the weighing on utility insofar as we bring more benefit to more women, presumably that is something good. The second thing is that we have more urgent and severe problems, i.e. domestic abuse, for example, stuff like that. This threatens livelihood, survival, and the things that are mental stability, for example, that are much more urgent for women that they have to deal with day-to-day basis. But lastly, in principle, this is an a priori responsibility. These are the actual gender-based harms, i.e. these harms are done only because they're against women. Things like domestic abuse and things like sexual violence, stuff like that. So these are done on their gender-based identity because they're born a woman. Other problems have alternatives. Black women have PLM, trans women have LGBT stuff and LGBT plus community stuff like that. But only on gender-based issues. If you don't deal with this, no one will. Why will infighting happen between the subsection? We told you three things in opposition. The first is that a win for one subsection is a loss to others. You have to fight their ass off, not only because their parties are democratically mandated to do so, or in less benevolent context, like they want their parties to dominate, right? So you're like more likely to fight one another in order to get the spotlight. Secondly, you have to emphasize on the difference. This is crucial. You're no longer able to utilize women-based common issues, i.e. anti-domestic abuse, because it's no longer competitively advantageous, i.e. you cannot win votes there, because there's going to be no difference between you and other party. So you have to resort into things like identity politics, for example, perpetuating and insinuating infighting, because you're highlighting the difference between all women, because you want to get your constituents in that side of the house. In our side of the house, to win, you need the vote of all women. If you don't deal with that, with the most urgent issues, you're more likely to lose voting, but also more importantly, lose trust. You probably don't want to do that. The last thing that we talked about was here, you want to get your unique niche to win urgently. This way, Beyonce, who sang that fucking song like Who Run the World Girls, have a sweatshop of young girls working underpaid in Bangladesh. You're unlikely to want to compromise or make coalition in that side of the house. Meaning that you're unlikely to make good policies, right? Even worse when governments say, they're so different. Exactly, you're not going to be able to compromise. But the last thing I want to talk about is minorities. So I think there's this weird idea from governments, we protect the minority, right? Three mechanisms why we win. The first is that majority will get the most spotlight anyway, i.e. white women who claim to be the elitists who want voting rights. The minorities are more likely to be locked out of political capital a priori. Secondly, the spotlight, right? Even if you neglect that majority idea, I think spotlight goes to the generationally privileged women, i.e. like liberal arts students studying in New York. Their issues will be heard and claimed to be more knowledgeable, and they have better access to things like media coverage. This negates government assertion of saying, saving Sudra women in India. They're less likely to get media coverage compared to the privileged women. But lastly, this redirects target retaliation. Because the conservative evangelists cannot, target the liberal students studying in New York, they can target the local Hispanic janitors working in the Texas diner. They will redirect the discrimination. They will redirect the retaliation on them. In opposition, we protect the most vulnerable of the vulnerable. We prove why success is much more likely to happen. Because of all those reasons.
All right, thank you, Outlook, for the wonderful speech. Calling for up reply here.
All right, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
All right, a second to set up my screen. Great. Okay. 3, 2, 1. Two things why government side of the house automatically loses the debate. Two things. Number one, it's important to note that the clear automatic loss of the government side of the house is clear from the moment that they haven't explained to you why they are able to reach tangible benefits with the segmentation that they're able to push for. Understand that segmentation, I think this is already clear in my DLO previously. A good segmentation is also still a bad solution to the fight for like feminism, because at the end of the day they're not able to push for tangible things, resulting into like a very redundant society, redundant progress within the feminist movement. But number two, I think that if the issue is identity, talking about how there are Black women or trans women that are discriminated in the current status quo, I think that the existence of like what my whip has already mentioned regarding the existence of LGBTQ plus movement pushing the rights for trans women, Black Lives Matter movement pushing for the rights of like Black women, for example, is necessarily like proportionate to their identity as well, right? Two things on this one then. Number one, they haven't proven to you why this is necessarily not enough yet. But number two, this also showcases that the proportionality to every identity struggle is addressed by respective movements. This means that if feminism is a movement that fights for women, then the issue that they should address is all women, for example, regardless of their identity. This is exactly the parameter that we're going to push for on the R side. We've already proven to you with these two things why we already won. Let's be charitable and engage to clashes. I have two things, right? Number one, let's talk about practical regarding the likelihood of success. Two things on this one, right? Number one, what did they tell you under their side of the house? They only simply told you that, okay, the implication of different segmentation is different. Therefore, you cannot simplify this movement as a commonality movement, for example. But number two, what did we tell you on our side? We told you that there are so many benefits from pushing for commonality. This looks like the possibility for electability, getting political power and political votes, getting social discourse that's pretty healthy under this side of the house because there is a grant of commonality and relatability between women. There is a push for economic incentive, for example, for women to be able to campaign because the people are convinced by their agendas, and there's also going to be like a healthier media coverage that's going to like most likely convince people in the gray area because the idea is more viable and more general rather than the segmented movements, etc., that we told you. What is the weighing on this? 4 things. Number 1, we've told you that people cannot get elected because of the difference of like interest that people have under their side of the house, and like even in this case of like segmentation, getting voters to begin with is very hard. They haven't proven why it's likely. But number 2, even if, for example, people can some certain women can get elected under their side of the house, I think that we also argued that it is harmful because segmentation will perpetuate less protection for other segmentation of women under their side of the house. This means that even if, for example, the elected one is for probably like white women, most likely those white women will also cater to the segmentation of their women, which is fellow white women. So even if on their side of the house there is someone getting elected, there is tangible changes, but it doesn't cater to all women. Different from under our side of the house, we already told you that women who want to get elected will most likely want to cater back because they are convinced by the narrative of commonality. There is healthier discourse, and most importantly, they have a moral responsibility to want to cater back. But number 3, I think that the minority that they want to protect under this side of the house ended up being not protected because the party pushed under their side of the house is also the majority. This proves that under their side of the house, they fail to understand what is the importance of pushing for segmentation, even if it comes to the expense of no tangible things at all. But number 4, I think that even if you want to buy the importance of segmentation under their side of the house, the prerequisite for you to count this argumentation is that they have to explain why is it likely to be healthy when every segment feels like their solution is the most urgent. I understand that in the current status quo, if the creation of segmentation of women, for example, perpetuated by this patriarchal system, obviously is something that's completely redundant towards like the progress of like feminist movement, exactly because they're not able to come to a common ground and a middle and solution in the middle as to why like they have to push for changes, right? This discussion in and of itself, it's already enough to prove to you why it's better under our side of the house. But 2 additional things. Number 1, we've already explained to you why under their side of the house, even if there is safe space, it's not going to be better because there's no policy changes. But number 2, we've already explained to you why segmented success is a failed success because even if you can get segmented, there is no tangible push for the representation. Very proud to vote for opposition.
All right, thank you, our opposition reply, for that fine speech. Now, to conclude the debate, we're calling upon Gov reply. Here.
Okay, hello. Am I audible?
You are.
All right. Let me start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Let's talk about what happened in this debate. Now, I'm going to separate this into 2 parts. So we're going to talk about the interest of feminist movement, and also the second is the sustainability of feminism movement brought by both of the team. Now, let's start with the first one, which is the interest of feminist movement. Now, the opposition bench is addressing that the interest of the feminist movement is to create an effective movement, which we both agree. Now, they also address that how identity issues are a different kind of movement, and how identity that came along with women should not be fought for in feminism movement. Now, as the government bench, we said that women came in their respective identity, and how not being discriminative will create a better solidarity in terms of feminist movement, and therefore creates more support in the feminist movement. Now, we think that the proposal that the government bench is more effective in terms to fulfill the interest of feminist movement, because in the end, the mechanism that the opposition bench trying to told you, how they're going to put the woman in the parliamentary, and how they assume that each and every woman are going to vote anyway. We think their goals is something that is good, but it will be achieved more in our side of the house, because in the end, we try to address each and every issues that creates the solidarity in the feminist movement and in the women community to in the end support women, because in terms of interest of feminist movement, we think the government bench is more able to explain to you on what is happening in the status quo, and for example, explaining how the different issues in women's coming from different variety of backgrounds is also affecting the way they live, and the way they make decision, and how they see the feminist movement itself. So we think we are more advanced in terms of explaining what is woman want, and what is woman facing in the status quo, and how it's affecting the effectivity to achieve the interests of feminist movement. And the second, we're going to talk about sustainability of feminist movement. What the opposition bench trying to bring in this debate is the idea how each and every woman is not too different, and it is okay to just prioritize the general ideas as the main idea. They also bring the idea that individualism is one of the problems that hampered the feminist movement. We say that in terms of sustainability, this is very dangerous. When they say it's individualism, we say it's an identity that you can't just throw away and is rooted for you, creating your mindset and oppressing you internally. They might give you the mechanism, but in the end, this mechanism is not going to fly, because internally, each and every woman in the movement is not invested and served fully in the movement itself. We're trying to create a safe space for women to pull out their issue card and respect it as equally important to address in the feminism agenda. And we think that this transparency in women community will create a sense of solidarity to also check and balances oppression issues in a more in-depth level. We explain to you how women from various identity will finally be on the same ground, not feeling discriminated towards one another, and feel included in the movement, therefore create more chances to strengthen the movement and create more sustainability for the movement. And they also talk about how segmentation success is not failure. Is failure. We say no. We think that segmentation success is a progress, because in the end, if you see it as a failure, then it means that you are being dismissive towards problems that women face in the reality or in the status quo. So we think we are winning in this debate, because we can explain to you the interest of feminist movement and how is it more effective to chase the intersectional strategies, and how the intersectional strategies will also create sustainability of feminist movement. So proud to propose.
All right, thank you so much, Gov Reply, for the fine speech. And thank you everyone for the great debate. Now it's time for the educators to deliberate. You don't have to leave the room. So for Abil, mungkin kita bisa langsung ke Discord aja ya, di room B9.
Okay.
Please wait here, everyone. Thank you.